Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We're at that time of year where it's hard for me to remember which version of the game I am playing, but we are back here with the Buffalo Wings and appreciate all the thoughts on how we should conclude this series that many of you have shared over the last several days. I think the consensus kind of agrees with my thinking. We've just won 127 games in a season and capped it off winning a World Series championship. We've won 4 titles in the last 5 years. The team is in great shape. And I think it's time, with the fact that we did all that literally in hours of when the new version of the game was coming out, I think we are going to wind things down over the next few episodes. So we did our season recap last time around. In this episode, I'm basically just going to play through the next few weeks until free agency. And then we're going to turn this thing over to somebody else. After this episode, we're going to do an episode where we kind of recap the entire series and figure out who our Mount Rushmore is for the Buffalo Wings. I know that some of you have some thoughts on that will be interesting to hear as well. Go over some of the highlights and the lowlights of this almost year-long playthrough that's closing in on 270 episodes. And then after that, we're going to see what happens over the next couple years and whether former franchise stalwart Deshaun Seifu and his running mate for a few seasons, Shamar Jenneret, end up being first ballot Hall of Famers in a couple of years. And then I think after that, we will also just let the AI sim ahead and see what happens to the Buffalo franchise over the medium to longer term. I think my goal right now is to probably sim 15 or 20 seasons. May kind of be ultimately Nero fiddling while Rome burns. I'm assuming the AI is not going to be as successful as we have been. If the AI is even more successful than we have been in this playthrough, it'll certainly be a blow to my ego, but we're probably not too far away from AI being able to beat me in a game like this. And so hopefully by the time we wrap this up, we'll even know whether some of the younger players on our team right now, the Arturo Casares, the Juan Toledos, the Jim Reicherts, who amazingly is already our all-time leader in home runs, find out whether those players ultimately become Hall of Famers, what they do in Buffalo and what they don't do in Buffalo, since I'm sure many of them will be moving on in the years to come. As I said, I think we've got the team in a pretty decent position. We've made a couple of moves that I'll talk about shortly that have lowered our salary obligations a bit for next season to a manageable level. And I think there's at least one other move that we're going to make that will help on that front. The big issue is 2 years from now in 2050, but I do have an escape hatch in there to get that $250+ million team salary, which is not a appropriate level for the Buffalo Wings, to something reasonable. My thought has always been that we'd bail on the team option for Nehemiah Vidale at the $36 million in the 4th year of that 4-year contract we signed him to. He's been excellent for us, but he's going to be closing in on 38 years old by the time we have to make that decision a year from now. And that would clear up a lot of the money. And then Ishmael Velasco, you may see here, we have exercised his team option for next year. I'll talk through that with you shortly. But we can get out of that contract a year from now too, and just those 2 moves alone would get us below $200 million to a number that, albeit still high for the resources we have, is certainly doable. Then there's also certainly high-priced arbitration-eligible guys like our catcher Bobby Huntington, pitcher Danny Black, right fielder Juan Toledo, shortstop Juan Palomo, not necessarily players we want to be moving on from, but there's still a lot of optionality in there for the AI. I would almost certainly get rid of Vidale, refuse that option, and most likely get rid of Velasco to get the finances under control for the 2050 season. It'll be interesting to see how the AI decides to proceed with that in the future. But before we get into the future, I'm going to talk about a couple of trades that we've made since the last episode to try to right-size the financial situation here, give us a little more flexibility with our team. We traded away the 27-year-old right-handed reliever Mike George. He's a guy that you may remember if you've been following us. We picked up on waivers before this season from Toronto. He had a solid year for us, but he's got no options left, and he was very uncertain to make our 26-man roster next year. He's a little older than some of the other relievers we have, and with no options left, just wanted to get him off the books and open up a little bit of space for some youngsters. He actually was the pitcher that we left off of the playoff roster, so probably not a complete surprise that we move on from him. Also sent a minor league pitcher, Rodolfo Reina, who looks like he might be a solid reliever eventually, but not a big-time player. And we got back minor league center fielder Nelson Soriano. Not necessarily a big-time player, but he's almost 20 years old. Looks like he will be a very good defensive center fielder, has slightly above average speed, and looks like his bat could be slightly above average. Not viewed as one of the top 200 prospects in baseball or anything, and he hit a $175 in rookie ball this past year in his introduction to professional baseball. So he's got a lot of work to do, but still think that 3, 4, 5 years from now, he could be in the mix for Buffalo to be a starting center fielder, or at the very least a very versatile and useful 4th or 5th outfielder, and potentially a trade chip for the new GM going forward. The more significant trade was getting rid of Jamari Habersham. And he's a guy who's really done a nice job for us since we brought him over in a trade with Kansas City. Played a lot for us at corner outfield spots, and then also over the last year and a half has played a lot more at first base. Was really kind of a part-time player his first couple years with us. And he's led the league in at-bats as our leadoff hitter the last couple years after we've really moved on from Deshaun Seifu. Bit of a down year for him this year, a below-average offensive player. He's going to be 32 years old next year. And he's set to make over $5 million in arbitration this year. Although we like his left-handed bat, it ultimately came down to the decision that we wanted to open up a spot on the team for 24-year-old left-handed hitter David Sandoval, who hit .373 for us and over 50 at-bats this year after hitting .316 with 41 homers and 102 ribbies in AAA over most of the year. More of a power hitter than Habersham, not quite going to hit for the same average as Habersham, despite the fact that he had a monster season as far as the batting average this year. Not quite as good defensively, but still more than competent, but a lot cheaper, and someone that we potentially would build around for the medium to long term. So want to see what he can do. And because we moved on from Habersham, that meant, as I already talked about, that we exercised our team option to bring Ishmael Velasco back. Velasco still above average speed, above average defensively. The fans love him. The batting profile doesn't look incredible, but he still ends up being very productive every year. He was just the Divisional Series MVP on the way to the World Series that we just won. He's a 3-time World Series MVP, a 5-time World Series champion, and has a 118 career WRC plus for us. Hit 300 this year, 19 homers, 25 steals, 41 doubles. Led the league with 116 runs scored. He's durable. He's a switch hitter. So although I noted that my theory would probably be for this to be his last season and then refuse the team options on both him and Vidale next year to really clean up the financial situation, I don't know that the AI will do that, but I'm trying to, in my own little way, perhaps set them up to make that decision. But with as good of a player as Velasco has been for us, and he's probably in consideration to be on the Mount Rushmore of Buffalo Wings at this point, wanted to try to keep this team as intact as possible for next season. I'd love to see them win a third World Series in a row without me as the general manager. And I think that bringing back Mr. Velasco rather than Mr. Habersham gives us a better chance of doing that. We also cleared a couple of other guys off of the 40-man roster. John Metzler, you may remember, we picked him up in a trade a few years ago, thought that he might be a backup catcher of the future for us. He's basically just spent the last 3 years in Albany for us, done a fine job there, but he's out of options. And with the fact that we've made a decision to bring back our starting catcher Huntington next year, no real role for him on the major league team, so figured we'd get what we could for him. Andres Alfaro is a player who does still have options, but as I look at this roster and who we have coming up through the minors, we actually have 4 or 5 young infielders right now who are on the 40-man or going to be added to the 40-man, most likely before the Rule 5 draft. Alfaro, a guy who doesn't hit many homers, doesn't draw many walks, and is not really a good defensive player anywhere except first base, although he can play a lot of defensive positions. Decided to try to extract some value with him. So we gave up some decent things, but we did bring back a young second baseman, Jake Carlson, who we think could be a useful player for us down the line. He's not the next Deshaun Seifu by any stretch of the imagination, doesn't have the same type of contact, and it looks like he's going to walk even less than Seifu does, but he does have excellent speed, excellent at avoiding strikeouts, potentially excellent gap power, good influence in the clubhouse, solid defensively, certainly not great, but not a complete embarrassment to play him at some infield positions, most likely third or second. Hit .254 with 5 homers in his introduction to rookie ball this year. Basically just trying to get another young player into our farm system for the new general manager to have as a potential asset going forward. And with those trades made, we also have made arbitration offers to all but one player who's arbitration eligible. The ones that we were a little unsure of that I talked about in the last episode were starting catcher Bobby Huntington and shortstop Juan Palomo. I really liked the duo of Danks and Huntington at catcher this year. The pitching staff had incredible success, and although Huntington didn't hit as many homers as we expected, he still had 34 doubles and a 116 WRC+, so he gave us an offensive dimension at catcher that generally we haven't had through this playthrough. I don't know if I would bring him back a year from now when his arbitration number is around 18 million. I think that hopefully the AI may consider moving on from him then, which would really clear the decks as far as the salary situation for Buffalo in a year, but that'll be out of my control. But as I said, I ultimately decided I wanted to try to bring back as much of this team as we practically could, given salary limitations, for next season to see if maybe they can do a three-peat without me, given that a three-peat is one thing that I was unable to accomplish in this playthrough. And then Juan Palomo has been our utility infielder / starting shortstop at times the last few years. The number's getting a little bit high, particularly if I do envision him as more of a utility guy with Josh Fuchs as the starting shortstop next year, which is kind of my vision. But again, after another week or two of this playthrough, my vision for the team is not really going to matter, but wanted to bring him back as well. So the only arbitration eligible player we're not going to bring back is Danny Kashuk. Tried using him in some trades because he's set to be a middle reliever making well over $5 million next year. He has been very successful for us. 3 years in Buffalo, he's put up a 2.14 ERA, but we've only pitched him 113 and a third innings given the depth of our bullpen. And although he's a very good righty, a very good lefty, with Aguirre and Toselli in the bullpen and Vidali in the starting rotation, over $5 million for a guy who might only be pitching 40 or 50 innings next year is starting to seem pricey to me. He essentially had negative trade value when I was trying to put trades together, which makes me think that other teams look at him similarly. He's also not the greatest influence in the clubhouse. Now, we've won World Series 2 of the 3 years he's been here, so obviously it's not that disruptive. But with the money he's trying to make, I think we move on from him. That'll open up even more money available for us to spend this offseason. I do tend to think that I'm going to put most of that back into scouting and player development before I leave because I don't want those things to be ignored entirely. But I think if we can't get a reasonable return on a trade for Kashuk over the next few weeks before free agency, we are probably just going to make him a $0 offer and let him hit free agency. If he hits free agency and he's only looking for $2 or $3 million, maybe the new team or the new GM will sign him back. But that will be out of my hands, unfortunately. And I've simmed ahead a day just to show you what I was talking about with Danny Kashuk. We shopped him, and basically we can get relievers who aren't as good as him, who are older than him, who are making good money in return, or we can get guys in their mid-30s that are kind of washed up guys on minor league contracts in return. So nothing particularly compelling for him. And certainly as I was working on some of those other trades that I just talked about, as well as other trades that we didn't end up executing, it seemed like Kashuk at best had no value and in many cases had negative value to the trades that we were working on, unfortunately. So odds are we'll continue to try to work something out over the next few weeks. But odds are, when all is said and done, we're just going to make a $0 offer to him and let him hit free agency. So I'm going to put that in there at this point just as a hold to fill the spot so I don't forget about it going forward if we're unable to get him off the books. And we've started to sign some of our minor league free agents, as well as number 5 starter Jim Coles. We extended Huntington to that 1-year deal. The fans are excited about it. Toselli will be back as a lefty, especially with the likely fact that we'll be moving on from Mr. Kashuk. The fans are excited to have Palomo back. The fans are excited to have Caper back. The fans are excited to have Black back. The fans are excited to have Banks back. So a lot of positive influences there on our fan interest, which remains well over 100 at this point. Basically, Kashuk is the only arbitration eligible player we haven't signed, so we're going to keep working on maybe doing something with him. If not, we'll sim through awards season and then see what the roster and the financial situation here looks like as we get to free agency. And we've made another minor trade. Again, we're just trying to kind of clean up the 40-man roster and try to ensure that the 26-man roster next season looks as close to the way that we would have it look. Trying to remain a puppet master to the extent that we can by making some moves. So we traded away Jeff House, the guy we picked up in the Rule 5 draft last year. Because he was injured much of the year, he still had more major league service time that he was going to need for us to retain him. Didn't really see a spot on the 26-man roster for him. And then we also traded away the 25-year-old pitcher, John Wisniewski. In the tutorial I did a week or two ago on how to build a pitching staff, talked a lot about drafting high school pitchers and some of the success we've had with that in this playthrough and other playthroughs for that matter. But to be fair, Wisniewski is a high school pitcher we drafted in the first round that hasn't worked out the way that we hoped. We picked him number 33 overall 7.5 years ago or so in 2041, if I could do some math. And good movement on his pitches, but the control just not that good. The stuff not as impressive as we would have hoped. Put up a 6.41 ERA in Albany this year, and he is also a guy who just completed his last option year. So rather get a little bit from him or for him. We got a little bit of cash, and then we got a middling relief prospect. Honestly, his profile doesn't look all that different than Wisniewski. He's a little younger. He's durable. And I think, honestly, he's probably got more of a chance of being a useful major leaguer than Wisniewski does at this point. So happy to bring him back. Another guy who's not a top prospect. Similar theme to some of the other trades we made, but does at least give a lottery ticket that's not mega millions odds into our organization. Maybe one or two of these young guys that we brought back in these recent trades ultimately becomes a useful player for the Buffalo Wings in the mid-2050s. And with that, award season is underway, Gold Glove season here, and Arturo Casares and Juan Toledo, our left and right fielders, both won Gold Gloves this year. For Casares, that's the second Gold Glove in left field in his future, or in his career. He's our center fielder of the future still, I believe. My thought would be we play out Velasco this final season and then likely refuse the team option on Velasco a year from now and then slide Casares over to center field. And then Juan Toledo, very solid right fielder, wins the first Gold Glove award of his career in his second full year in the majors, and he has been a big-time offensive player for us in his limited time in the majors at this point. A 154 WRC plus over the first 1,150 at-bats of his career. He's going to be an interesting decision for the new management team going forward because we have signed Reichert and Casares to those long-term extensions. It's conceivable that we'll have to trade away Toledo someday, still making the major league minimum next year, but then you can see his numbers start getting pretty significant. Will be interesting to see if they trade him away, let him play out those arbitration years and then move on, or somehow are able to get him signed to an extension. As I talked about, certainly moving on from the likes of Vidale, possibly Velasco, maybe even Auclair, although I wouldn't do it. I certainly would not accept that arbitration number on Huntington next year. I would trade him away in a year or let him just hit free agency. There's ways to definitely free up some money. Jim Coles is basically just on the team now as our fifth starter because he's the only captain personality that we have. But over the next year, if one of these younger guys that's a big-time player for us develops a captain personality, that would be great. And $8.5 million for a guy who's a fifth starter a year from now may be a little rich too. But again, I will not actually be the one making those decisions. Mariano Rivera Award, once again dominated in the voting by the Buffalo Wings. Floyd Auclair, a unanimous winner. Luis Palencia and Chris McClintock also got votes. McClintock, who finished third among the Buffalo Wings, is our closer who had 49 saves to lead the league and a 2.82 ERA. Palencia is one of the guys that we signed to a long-term deal a long time ago, and this is another thing that I talked about in our tutorial that we did on building a pitching staff a few weeks ago, a week or two ago actually. And we signed him almost a decade ago at this point, or not a decade, I guess 6, 7 years ago at this point, to a 10-year contract that was really reasonable. Felt with his abilities that he's got 40 stamina, he's got 4 pitches, felt he could be a starter for us at the back end of the rotation if we needed, in which case signing him for a couple $1 million a year would be great value. And then thought the worst case scenario was that he'd be a useful, consistent reliever for us, which he has been with a 2.97 ERA over 266 and 2/3 innings. Still a guy who could start for us if we needed to. Our pitching staff is so deep that he's never actually started a game in the majors, but he's been a member of our last 5 World Championship teams. So nice to see Palencia finish second in the voting for that Mariano Rivera Award after a fantastic season with a 1.29 ERA for us this year. And then, of course, the winner, Floyd Auclair, and this is his 3rd Mariano Rivera Award. He has been a fantastic pitcher for us ever since we picked him up in a trade with the Blue Jays. And 1 year as a starter for us, and then we moved him into that stopper role. And in 6 years as a stopper, led the league in games pitched 5 times, holds every single season, 205 strikeouts this year working out of the bullpen with a 1.80 ERA. He has been fantastic for us, and he will be back next year. And then there will be a team option at $12 million that the new leadership will need to decide on. Another day, another set of awards. It looks like the Silver Sluggers, and it looks like we've won at least one of those. Not surprisingly, Jim Reichert, our first baseman, along with Arturo Casares and Juan Toledo. So the 3 young sluggers, all named Silver Sluggers. Toledo and Casares get the nice combo of a Gold Glove and a Silver Slugger. Toledo, we already talked about, 296 average, 36 homers, 100 ribbies. Would love if my replacement finds a way to keep him around for the long term. Casares hit 260, a league best 44 homers and 109 ribbies with a 126 WRC plus. Now a 3-time All-Star, 2-time Gold Glove winner, 1-time Silver Slugger, Rookie of the Year, 3 World Series titles, and 2 Playoff Series MVP awards, including the most recent World Series MVP. And he just turned 26 years old. So Casares off to a great start in his career. And then Jim Reichert, all he's done is lead the league in ribbies 3 consecutive years. Hit 277 this year, 40 homers, 135 ribbies, 136 WRC plus on the season with an 866 OPS. Still shocking that he's only been an All-Star once, but at this point he is an MVP, an All-Star award, 2 Silver Sluggers, and he has been a member of our last 4 World Championship teams. So we had kind of been a team focused on pitching throughout much of this playthrough, and that led us to a really nice degree of success. But with these young bats emerging over the last few years, that's really pushed us to another level. We picked up Reichert in a trade. Toledo was an international amateur free agent, as was Arturo Casares. And if you were looking closely, you'll notice that our old catcher, who never hit for us, won the Silver Slugger in Los Angeles. Now, he was making more than Huntington made this year, and he's set to be a free agent now while we've still got Huntington, so not feeling bad that we traded him away. Hit only 240 this year, but for him that's a pretty big amount. But 18 homers and 55 ribbies for Juan Ramirez as he earns the first Silver Slugger award of his career, along with his first All-Star game as soon as he got away from us in Buffalo. And we had no contenders for Rookie of the Year this year, but Craig Sitton, who we promoted before the season from AAA to Major League, won the 2048 National League Manager of the Year. I I think when you win 127 games in a season, you are likely to be manager of the year more often than not. As we head into the end of awards season, the Cy Young Awards just announced. A very tight battle in the American League. Andres Partida of the Texas Rangers, 20-5 with a 2.69 ERA, led the American League in wins, FIP minus, and WAR, and had 288 strikeouts. Wins his 4th Cy Young Award, just edging out Nate Neufeld of the Seattle Mariners. He led the league with 33 games, 226 and a third innings pitched, a 2.31 ERA, and a 0.95 WHIP, as well as 76% quality starts. 17-11 record for him with 282 strikeouts. So a great battle there. Neufeld, perennial Gold Glove winner at pitcher in the American League, just missed out on earning his first Cy Young Award. No surprise at all in the National League. Ernesto Zambrana of the Giants, 20-7, led the league in innings pitched, strikeouts, ERA, strikeouts per 9 innings, 91% quality starts, 45 FIP minus, and 11.3 WAR. The unanimous winner, Nehemiah Vidale, our ace, 20-3 with a 1.83 ERA, finishes second. Danny Black, 19-4 with a 2.70 ERA, and Mariano Rivera Award winner Floyd Auclair also received votes from the Buffalo Wings. And last but not least, the MVP Awards. In the American League, Irving Barunda, who was a MVP winner multiple times back in the day with the Montreal Expos, wins it for the Chicago White Sox, led the AL with 199 hits and a 352 batting average, an OPS of close to 1.1, a ridiculous 197 WRC plus, and a 9.3 WAR, 44 homers, 121 ribbies. The 34-year-old Barunda, already closing in on 2,200 hits, should have 500 homers within the next couple seasons. Going to have 1,500 runs scored and 1,500 ribbies as long as he stays healthy. Career 321 hitter, 87.6 WAR. Looking like one of the great careers in baseball history. He's had over 30 homers and over 100 ribbies at this point for 8 of the last 9 years. And he really barely missed it a couple of other seasons. So a brilliant career for Mr. Barunda. And over in the National League, a very tight battle. Zambrana almost does that rare Cy Young Award MVP combination. He got half of the first place votes, but he finished just behind Ignacio Castanon, third baseman from the Padres, hit 298, 41 homers, 122 ribbies with a league best 7.2 WAR. Looking at Buffalo Wings, Juan Toledo finished 4th in the voting. Nehemiah Vidale was 6th. Arturo Casares 7th. Ramiro Medina 9th. Jim Reichert 13th. And Danny Black and Floyd Auclair also received MVP votes as well. So the Buffalo Wings, not surprisingly, were pretty well represented during awards season, which you would expect after a 127 wins in a World Series title. And we've made it to free agency, and this will probably be the last real decision-making that we're making in this long run here in Buffalo. Yoshiteru Ishii looks like an interesting player. We'll go ahead and scout him, but I think with the money he's looking for and the strength of our bullpen already, probably not a high priority for us to go after. Take Goon Kim, another guy who's mildly interesting with his profile, but he's also looking for $16.5 million a year as a 32-year-old coming over from South Korea, so probably not going to be on our short list. Interesting independent league player discovered, Ernesto Miranda. Looks like a useful first baseman, but not really useful given the strength that we have on our team. Major league free agents, we don't have anyone on the list. We kind of have our guys signed. We did end up just having to let Mr. Kashuk hit free agency, so we'll take a quick look and see roughly what he's looking for compared to the $5.5 million that he was set to make in arbitration. And it looks like he's looking for even more. He's looking for $7 million. Just didn't think that was the right decision for us, and you can see it's definitely opened up decent money for us at this point. So again, we're going to try to maintain to some extent the relatively strong budgets that we've had in scouting and player development over the course of this playthrough. Clearly, that can all be changed instantaneously once we do turn the team over to somebody else, but feel like we've brought back pretty much most of the team from a year ago. We exercised the option on McClintock. We've got the same 5 starters back. Auclair's back. And then the bullpen with Palencia, Aguirre, Caper, Toselli, Jaramillo, and Warrior lurking to finally get full-time spots this coming year. And then even when we go down to AAA, you got Caleb Creveling, who's the number 40 prospect in baseball, who doesn't look like he's too far away from being able to help. Feel like the pitching staff is still in excellent shape to maybe have another historic season next year. And then honestly, in terms of the offense, we're going to have to figure out someone else to be a leadoff hitter with the fact that we moved on from Habersham. Likely will be Velasco against righties and possibly Palomo against lefties sliding up into that spot. But that's going to ensure more playing time for Sandoval and potentially Aguayo Leal. So we certainly have a guy who can play DH or the first base / corner outfield spots that Habersham was playing. And besides that, we're basically bringing back everybody who was on this 127-win team a year ago. So think that the Wings are still well positioned for success in the future. In our next episode, we're going to kind of do a series recap, take a look into some of the statistics for the top players and what they've accomplished in Buffalo, as we've made 21 straight playoff appearances with 7 titles. Going to pick out our Mount Rushmore. Those of you, and I know there's a lot of you who have been with us the whole way, if you've got thoughts on that after I announce my list, would love to hear them and have that discussion. And we'll likely be putting out this series recap episode on Monday morning Eastern Time in the United States. So about 2 days from when this is being posted on Saturday morning. And then after that episode, we're going to turn things over to the AI, and I'll be checking in several more episodes to cover the things I talked about, find out whether Seifu is a first ballot Hall of Famer or not, and then follow what the Buffalo Wings do over the coming years and whether any of the young stars on this team ultimately end up joining Seifu in Cooperstown sometime in the future. So, going to be interesting. We still have several episodes to go. It's been a really fun playthrough for me this year with the Buffalo Wings, and it's been made fun by the viewership and the comments and the interaction with those of you who are still listening at this point. And I know there's a lot of you out there who have been very loyal watchers of this series, and I do appreciate that. So we've got a few more episodes to go, but you're likely to see more OOTP 25 content from me in the coming days and weeks. And eventually, probably late March, early April, we'll be starting out on our long-term playthrough. Hopefully it'll be as well received as this Buffalo Wings series was over the past year. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.